Hey, what's going on, guys? This My name is Paul, and I'm on Twitter at Fantasy Freezer. I'm a redraft and dynasty contributor at Dynasty Football Factory. Just as of last month, actually, it's been really fun joining them over there and getting a lot of content up there on the website, getting ready for draft season. Um, just a little bit about me, and then I'm going to get right into these questions. I've been playing fantasy for about 7 years now, but it's only been the last couple years I've really gotten deep into it and done a lot of research. And I decided to jump into the Twitter sphere last year, last off season, and I've really loved being a part of that community and getting to know people. So I'm excited to be in the Discord today and just kind of get my name out there and getting to talk to everybody. It's awesome. I'm excited to be invited on here, honestly. So I try to look at a lot of these questions ahead of time and jot down some notes. But it's definitely not going to be super organized. But I'm going to try to start with a lot of dynasty stuff first, and then kind of move my way more into redraft. Although I'm sure I'll drift back and forth between the two. But let's see. Let's see right here. All right, so start off with some dynasty stashes, sells, and buys. I wrote down a couple of names here. I'm going to start with the buys because I feel pretty good about those. So I love running backs. First of all, I just got to say, like, super heavy running back. I just put out a tweet today, just talking so much trash about zero RB. Nothing personal out there if you love zero RB, but I'm just very pro running back right now. Just the way the NFL is shaping up right now, it's just very top heavy at the running back position. So I put a lot of stock in having those stud running backs. So my first two guys I'm actually going to name here, it might be surprising that I consider them buys, but I think DeAndre Swift and Cam Akers are both very affordable right now, especially Cam Akers, with the recent talk of Sean McVay saying, running back by committee, and we're going to use four running backs. The truth is that Cam Akers is a great prospect. Um, he is a far superior prospect to Darrell Henderson. Obviously, he's better than Malcolm Brown, and I'm not even sure who the fourth guy there was supposed to be. I guess John Kelly is still there. Um, but I think Akers is going to be the main guy here, and I think he is going to get the workload. And I think right now there are people that are panicked, and I definitely think that you can acquire him for less than he's worth. This guy in a super flex league worth a top 6, 7 pick in a one quarterback dynasty, uh, easily worth a top 5 pick. So if you can get him for a late first right now, especially with college football up in the air, I definitely think he's worth a buy. Um, the only reason I'd say not to is because the Rams have a really tough schedule, and you might be able to get him cheaper if he does play a few weeks and maybe doesn't get the full workload early in the season. His price might even drop lower. Um, but I've actually been coming around and getting very excited about DeAndre Swift. I loved him as a prospect, and I'm not an expert college scout or anything, but I listen to a lot of people that I think are very smart, and I was very excited for Swift as a prospect. And then he kind of fell to the side when Clyde Edwards-Helaire went in the first round, and Swift went to the Lions. Not a super appealing landing spot, but I've really been coming around on him, just remembering how amazing he was as a prospect, and really thinking about what his role can be in Detroit. Uh, and just realizing that I don't think Kerryon Johnson's really going to be that much of a threat to him. I think he really can take over this job from day one, and he has a three down skill set. And one thing that was brought to my attention recently that I didn't realize is that I think 7 out of the last 8 seasons, the Lions have had a running back with at least 50 receptions, which I thought was pretty surprising. That Matt Stafford, he really does like to utilize that running back out of the backfield. It was Theo Riddick for a few years. I think maybe Reggie Bush was in there. Um, but when you think about DeAndre Swift and just what he's able to do in the passing game, if the Lions can improve their offense overall, which I think having Matt Stafford healthy for this season will kind of do automatically. I think you could be looking at a guy who can be a sneaky sort of top 24 running back this year, but just has so much potential for the future. So those are my first two guys. Just pivoting over to some other positions real quick. I don't want to spend forever on just dynasty buys, but I think if you're a contending team, I think Adam Thielen is a really great value right now, especially if he's on a team that really isn't contending this year. He's going to be 30 next month, and there are definitely people that are eager to move on, especially after he had an injury-prone or injury-riddled season, I should say, last year. People really don't remember that he's essentially points per game. He's been wide receiver 7, wide receiver 8, and then last year before he got hurt, I think he was in that top 10 again. So just super consistent. Going to get so many targets with Stephon Diggs out of Minnesota. So if you can add him to your roster when you're making a push for the championship, I think he's a great guy to look out for. But if you're rebuilding, I think N'Keal Harry is sort of the other side of that coin. N'Keal Harry is a guy to go out and buy if you are looking long term, because I do think that we have forgotten, that he was, I don't know if I'd say he was the best wide receiver prospect in last year's class, but he was a great prospect. He was drafted in the first round. And I think he still has a ton of potential to break out. And, now that Cam Newton's there, he's probably got a better chance of having a bounce back season. And then you're going to miss that buy window because everyone's going to remember why he was so highly sought after in the first place. So if you can go out and get him, for a discount, I've seen him going after a lot of the wide receivers from last year, like Darius Slayton. I've seen him going after Deontay Johnson, and I still think he's at that level. I'd take him over Slayton. I think I'd take him over Deontay, but they're close. But I think a lot of times it's, what have you done for me lately? And so if you can flip one of these guys that maybe was more productive than him last year, or maybe a high second rounder and get Harry, I think that's worthwhile. And the last one I'll say for buys would be Derek Carr. If you are in a super flex league and you're really hurting for a third quarterback, I think there are opportunities with Derek Carr. I don't really expect him to lose his job. I know they signed Mariota. I think with the weapons that they've added, that he'll be able to fend off Mariota and stay on the field with Henry Ruggs, Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, Brian Edwards. I just think there's enough there at his disposal with a good offensive line that he's going to be able to get enough done. Maybe not to be anything great for fantasy, but in Superflex, even some of the worst quarterbacks are still scoring more than whoever else you'd be able to put in that flex spot. So if you can go out and acquire a Carr, you'll have a bye week fill in. You'll have a guy who can step in if there's an injury. And I do think he's pretty attainable right now. Okay, so those are the guys I like. Okay, but now some guys I'm looking to sell. These are guys that I'm not optimistic about either for this year or for long term. And I'll kind of fly through these pretty quickly. So top of my list would be a pair of running backs that have had success the last couple of years. Well, some success, but I don't see a lot more for them in the future. And that would be James Conner and Philip Lindsay. I actually wrote some profiles about them over on Dynasty Football Factory for a free series we're doing. Some like sort of snapshots of players talking about their outlook for 2020 and in Dynasty. And I was very pessimistic on these two guys for a couple reasons. With Connor, I do think that I don't like the injury prone label, but I think it applies to James Conner. I don't think he's a particularly impressive player. Not like everybody in the NFL is a good player, but I don't think that he's a particularly special running back. He doesn't have burst. He doesn't have, outstanding agility. He's a bruiser, and his skill set is highly replaceable. He's going into a contract year, and the Steelers don't have a great cap situation. So I really don't expect him to be re-signed by the Steelers. And when you look at his outlook on the free agent market, and this goes for Philip Lindsay because he'll also be a free agent. You've got Aaron Jones, Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook, Leonard Fournette, Kareem Hunt. just this absolutely stacked class of free agents. Todd Gurley's going to be a free agent. Kenyon Drake, just a free agent class of running backs like you've never seen. Chris Carson as well. Uh, and I think when the musical chairs, when the music stops, I just don't see a seat for James Conner, in any kind of a primary back role, especially because of how fragile he's been. And I feel the same about Philip Lindsay. He's 5'7", he's undersized. Um, and he's not an exceptional pass catcher. He really it's amazing for him to come in as an undrafted free agent and put up 1,000-yard rushing seasons, but the truth is that he just isn't exceptional in a lot of ways that are measurable. He doesn't have the size that NFL GMs are looking for in a three down back, and he doesn't have really the pass catching skill set to be a three down back. So I don't see him in anything more than a timeshare after this season. And the thing is, I believe he's about to be 26, or he just turned 26. So he was very old as a rookie, and he's very old now. He's already outside of the prime age for running back production. So those two guys, I definitely be looking to flip them, especially James Conner. If you can sell him to a contending team, you can probably get something. Philip Lindsay, his value is pretty low right now, so I don't know reasonably what you can sell him for, but I would definitely be putting him on the block. The other guy I was going to mention is Keenan Allen, and I know Keenan Allen is loved by many in the fantasy community. He's an amazing wide receiver, amazing route runner, but I don't really see a super promising future for Keenan Allen. I mean, I think he will continue to be a good wide receiver, but I don't expect in the near future to see any more of those top finishes that we've seen. I just wanted to look something up real quick about Keenan Allen. So he's 28. That's what I thought. He's 28 years old this year. And I believe he's entering maybe the last year of his contract. Let me just double check that. But as we know, he's got Tyrod Taylor right now at quarterback. Probably at some point Justin Herbert, and I'm not excited for either of those. Tyrod Taylor's career high in passing yards is about 3,100 yards. Career high 20 passing touchdowns, and that was with Anthony Lynn in Buffalo, who's the head coach of the Chargers. So I don't expect Tyrod to suddenly change up his play style. I think he's going to be low volume. I think he's going to scramble. And yes, it does look like this is the last year on Keenan's deal. So, he's either going to be re-signed here in San Diego and have to play with Herbert next year, who's a quarterback I'm not particularly high on at 29 years old, or he's going to be moving to a new team, in which case, usually there is that transition period when you move to a new team. Some players adapt faster than others, but typically you see a drop in production, especially when elite wide receivers move to new teams. You usually do see lower production the following year. So, if we're 2 years out from Keenan Allen potentially returning to what he was last year, which is, that mid to low and wide receiver one, I think you can get more than that for him right now. And, he'll be 30 years old in 2 years. So I'm looking to sell him, not for nothing, especially if I am contending. I'm not looking to sell him for nothing, but I think there are people out there who are still very high on Keenan, and I would definitely be looking to see what I could get in return. So let me move real quick into some players I'm stashing. I wasn't super clear, on a definition for this. Is a stash somebody who specifically is going very late, or somebody who has not produced before, or is a young player? I'm not really sure. So I'm just going to cover a few guys that I think you might want to hold on to. Either refrain from trading them because I think their value is going to go up, or refrain from dropping them because I think they may have a chance to be relevant either soon or next year. So the first one's kind of surprising. Well, the first two I'll say are kind of surprising because they're actually older players. The first one's Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think you might be better off holding on to Ryan Fitzpatrick as opposed to, I assume in a super flex league, he wouldn't be dropped to the waiver wire, but selling him for, for whatever you can get. Because the truth is Fitzpatrick was actually pretty solid last year. Kind of blew my mind. I think it was the fantasy footballers I was listening to, and they said that Fitzpatrick was the QB2 last year from week 6 on. QB2 overall, just behind Lamar Jackson. for what is that, 10 weeks of the season. So I think, whatever you get from him at the beginning of the year, I think he will be usable in a number of games to start the year before we eventually see Tua. So I think, to take advantage of that quarterback depth and hold on to him or maybe flip him if he has a big week one, I think that's going to be better value for you than to sell him now. The other older player is Jarek McKinnon. You know, I have many times over the past 2 years forgotten that Jarek McKinnon existed. I forgot that he was on the 49ers. He's been, MIA for 2 seasons because he's had these two injuries. But now he's 28 years old, so a little older for a running back, but he's allegedly healthy. He's still under contract with the Niners on a pretty sizable deal that he got from them. Raheem Mostert is looking for a trade, and that's probably not going to happen. But still, he's looking for a way out. Tevin Coleman's not good at football, and he's also had injury history. So, there's a chance, and the Niners run so many rushing plays. They had three different guys with over 120 carries last year. So, McKinnon could just be sitting on your bench, could have been sitting there for 2 years, but he might actually have some fantasy relevance this year. Jeff Wilson Jr. had fantasy relevant games last year for the Niners, as did Matt Breida, as did Raheem Mostert, Tevin Coleman. So you could see some valuable games from Jarek McKinnon. And I really doubt you're going to get much for him if you try to trade him. So definitely, I'd say hold on to him, stash him for later. And I'd also like to just mention two rookies that I think will have some value either at some point this year or next year, and that would be Laviska Shenault and Anthony McFarland. I'm pretty high on these two guys. Laviska Shenault, I really like, in that same sort of tier. I like him a little better than Brandon Ayuk, although I acknowledge Ayuk's going to have more opportunity this season, but I like Shenault better as a player. He's close with Michael Pittman, and I don't think he's in as bad a spot, as it looks on the surface. The Jaguars don't have a good offense, but he could easily become the number 2 wide receiver there. Beat out D.D. Westbrook and Chris Conley and see 80, 90 targets, maybe some runs out of the backfield. So I think he's in a good spot now, but I also think that just looking at that team and how they're building, they could be in position to grab a great quarterback next year, or if Gardner Minshew works out. Either way, I think there's a good chance Laviska ends up with a franchise quarterback. He could easily be the number 2 next to DJ Chark. So I like his chances as just this freak athlete to emerge as a relevant guy at some point in the future. And then with McFarland on the Steelers, I don't really see. I think he's the best running back on that team already. I like I said, I'm not a big James Conner fan. I think he's gone after this year. I think Benny Snell is one dimensional. I think Jalen Samuels is one dimensional. I think McFarland maybe he won't be a feature guy, but I think he next year, maybe out of necessity, he could see a lot of volume if James Conner walks. And the Steelers can't invest a lot of money into a free agent, and they don't want to sink a lot of draft capital. Maybe they roll with McFarland. So I think he's got a chance to improve his value year over year. So those are some guys that I'm going to be stashing. Now I'm going to try to knock this next question out now because it's going to be a disaster. But it was a really interesting question that I didn't really know how to approach, which is Corporal Casual asked, if the 2019 and 2020 running backs were in the same class, how would you draft them? Now, I assume this means in the same rookie class, like I'm doing a rookie draft. What order am I drafting them? Which maybe I'm just overthinking this, but it leads me to another important question, which is, am I assuming that these 2019 running backs have already played a full season and I've already seen what they've been able to do in the NFL? Because if that's the case, even though I love Jonathan Taylor as a prospect, I'm still going to be taking Jacobs and Sanders over him because I've seen them succeed in the NFL. I have reason to believe they will be RB1s for multiple seasons. So, but I'm going to assume that's not what the question's asking. And it's asking if these guys were all coming out and I only knew their prospect profiles, their landing spots, and their draft capital, what order am I going to take them in? And in that case, it's Jonathan Taylor, number 1, because Jonathan Taylor, as a prospect, is the closest thing to Saquon Barkley that we've seen in a long time. You know, could be a generational talent. I think he's incredible in terms of his athletic profile. His speed scores off the charts. His production at Wisconsin was unbelievable. 2,000 yards in 3 consecutive seasons, I believe. So this guy's a freak, and so he's going first. And then begrudgingly, I think I'd have to take Clyde Edwards-Helaire second, just knowing the landing spot in the draft capital, followed by Josh Jacobs. Once again, a draft capital thing, just first round running backs get volume. And he was a good player at Alabama, and he's a good athlete. And then after those three, it'd probably be Dobbins and Swift, very close together. Little Dobbins a little favored just because his landing spot is so juicy for next year's production. He could really blow up in that offense. But I do like Swift a little better as a player. And then right after Swift, it would be Sanders and Akers kind of close together. I like both, second round picks. Very good prospects, very good athleticism. And then bringing up the rear, I think David Montgomery would be the next guy there. That would be, what is he? The eighth running back of that group. And then kind of a toss up between Keyshawn Vaughn, Devin Singletary. And I didn't really make a list out any further than that. I think those are the main guys that we're really interested in. So that would be my redraft of the 19 and 20 running backs, assuming we didn't have any of the 2019 running backs actual statistics in the NFL. All right. So now there's a couple of smaller questions I'm going to just try to knock out, maybe about specific players. And because there's a couple questions I got about specific players, their dynasty and redraft value. So I'm just going to talk about Gus Edwards real quick, Darius Geis, and Cooper Kupp. I think those are the three that I got questions about. Although I'm seeing more questions popping up on my screen, it's kind of giving me some anxiety. All right. So the quick one, a quick one about Gus Edwards, just asked if he's worth a stash in dynasty. So my position is basically, if you've got a dynasty roster with super deep benches, so deep, you go to the waiver wire, you don't even recognize the players. Absolutely, hold on to Gus Edwards. You might as well. Mark Ingram gets hurt, maybe he has some value. I just don't know what we can expect for him moving forward, just because, like I mentioned previously, the 21 running back class, the free agent class, is just so insane. It's so stacked, and there's only so many jobs to go around. I just don't know if we can expect Gus Edwards to land anywhere where he's going to be getting, more than 80, 90 touches as sort of a change of pace or power back, whatever. So yeah, not much excitement about Gus Edwards. With Darius Geis, though, dynasty and redraft thoughts, I like him. He makes me nervous. I mean, he makes every single person that about Darius Geis is nervous. Darius Geis is nervous about Darius Geis. He obviously has everybody scared with the repeated injuries. But the thing is that he's just turned 23 years old. He was a second round pick. He was a great running back prospect. So, a lot is working in his favor. If he can stay healthy, I think he can put it together and be awesome. I think he can be an RB2 this season if he can stay on the field. So there's reason to like Darius Geis. So if you have him in a dynasty league, you need a strong stomach, but I wouldn't be trying to get rid of him for anything. If someone offers you a first round pick, especially if it's got potential to be, early to mid, I'm taking that and running easily. A late first, I would consider it. But if I'm a contending team and I think he can contribute this year, I think I hold him, even for that price. So definitely like Geis. I definitely think he can still break out. So in terms of his redraft value, though, I do like him. Where he's going, sixth, seventh round. I think he's decent value. It makes me nervous to have him like as my RB3, but like I said, I'm a very running back heavy drafter. So if I'm getting Geis in round 7, I probably already have 3 running backs. So at that point, his upside is huge, and you don't have to rely on him as a week to week starter. So I think he's in a good spot in terms of his ADP. I'm not going to have a lot of him because I like a lot of the wide receivers going in that area. You can get Chark, McLaurin, Marquise Brown, a lot of those guys around guys. So I'm probably not going to be having a lot of him, but I definitely don't mind people taking the shot. Okay. So another one that I thought was interesting. This was an interesting question. Let's see. It was, should you draft Jerry Judy if you grab Cortland Sutton in the early rounds? Um, just to see which receiver lock targets the most. So in general, I don't believe in handcuffing, especially not wide receivers. So I definitely wouldn't encourage you to draft Jerry Judy specifically because you draft Cortland Sutton. And I'm not really even high on drafting Jerry Judy in general, unless you're playing in a decently deep league and, he's a bench guy for you. But rookie wide receivers in general, last year is an outlier season. Rookie wide receivers in general are not what you want to be relying on for consistent production. And so, as much as I love Jerry Judy as a prospect, I love him in Dynasty. You cannot expect too much from Judy or really any of these rookies, but especially Judy. Looking at, okay, Drew Lock is an unproven quarterback. He has Noah Fant, Cortland Sutton, Melvin Gordon out of the backfield, even KJ Hamler, who's another rookie there. He's got a lot of competition for targets, and this was a team that was 27th in pass attempts last season. So there's not a really clear path for Judy to have a ton of upside. Um, so yeah, like I said, definitely don't reach for him if you have Sutton. I think Sutton's safe. I don't think you need to hedge your bet there. Just draft Sutton. And if it happens to be that you know Judy falls to you very late, and you need some wide receiver depth, then by all means grab him. But I don't think there's really any shot that he's going to have one of these blow up seasons like we saw last year with AJ Brown, DK Metcalf, etc. Um, let's see. All right, let's get into some redraft stuff because I'm just too excited about redraft. So we're talking about some redraft sleepers. Okay, redraft sleepers, rounds 10 or later. I did write down some guys here. So I was looking at Fantasy Pros ADP, Fantasy Pros overall ADP. So guys going around or later than 120 overall. I guess that would be the end of the 12th round, unless I'm terrible. Or sorry, 10th round. 10 times 12 is 120, right? So around 120 or later. Um, and this is sort of cheating because technically he's just inside that range, but that I assume that means you can sometimes get him later. That would be John Brown. Is a really good guy to look at around that range, that round 10 range. Um, Wide receiver 20 last season. Has had a previous 1,000-yard season. Really, injuries have been his big concern, but he's been a very good wide receiver. And he's gonna have big games this year. And I know Stephon Diggs has moved to Buffalo now, and so John Brown's now the number two in that offense. But I think at his price tag, where he's going the wide receiver 46, he's going behind Justin Jefferson, another rookie. He's going around. He's going behind Jerry Judy. He's going around all these other rookies. I think that he is going to get targets. I think he's going to produce big games, at least in certain game scripts. You'll be able to use him, and I think he'll have spike weeks. So especially in best ball, I like him. But even in redraft, if you have a bigger starting lineup or you need a flex play with upside, I really like John Brown's ADP right now. And just scrolling down a little bit, try to go kind of in order. I think Zach Moss is worth a look in the 10th round. Just taking the shot that either Singletary gets hurt or he is able to sort of take the main role in that committee, or even just taking the goal line work. He could have a decent role. You could maybe predict which games the Bills are going to be leading. He might have a little better game script, so you can kind of take advantage of that. Because you're not going to find weekly studs too often down here this late, but these are guys that I like compared to the other guys in that range. I'd rather have Zach Moss than Tony Pollard, who's going just after him. Because Tony Pollard, he's a direct backup. He's a handcuff. It's very unlikely you're going to put him in your lineup unless Ezekiel Elliott gets hurt. But there is definitely a world where Zach Moss is relevant without an injury to Devin Singletary because we just don't know how that backfield is going to shake out. So I like Zach Moss a little bit there. I think the most egregious, or I should say the biggest sleeper, everybody's sleeping on Golden Tate. currently going as the wide receiver 54, which is just crazy to me. Um, he, I believe, averaged the most points per game of any of the Giants wide receivers last year. I believe he missed the first 4 games with a suspension, and then he missed a game later with a concussion, or he like went out in the first quarter. So he didn't have a full season, but he was getting consistent targets, 8, 9 targets, and scoring touchdowns with Daniel Jones. So I think wide receiver 54 is way too late for a guy who's going to get targets. This is a team with a bad defense. This is a team with a young quarterback. Golden Tate's a slot receiver. So I think he could get peppered with targets in shootouts, in games where the Giants are behind, and really just supply you with that consistent flex floor where you can plug him in if you need, 8, 9 points. So I like Golden Tate a lot. I'm going to have him on a lot of teams. I already have him on a good number of teams, redraft teams. But if you want to go a little more upside, you can also currently get N'Keal Harry at wide receiver 59 and Jalen Rager at wide receiver 52. So those are a couple guys who I think maybe have higher upside than Tate, with obviously a lot more risk. But if Harry can emerge as sort of the number 2 target in that Patriots offense now with Cam Newton there, and if Rager, I mean, he can emerge as the number 1 option potentially with Deshaun Jackson constantly injured and being more of that vertical threat, and Alshon Jeffrey probably starts the season on the pup. Um, Rager could quickly be the top wide receiver for Carson Wentz, and he could be seeing, he's probably got the easiest path to 100 targets of any of the rookie wide receivers. So, I think his ADP is very fair. I think he's a very, very high upside play that you can go for. And N'Keal Harry as well, just going so late in drafts right now. Excuse me, getting a little dehydrated. But yeah, those are some of my favorite guys going round 10 or later. I'll also say Naheem Hines and Duke Johnson are viable later if you need some running back depth, just because they'll have games where you can sort of expect that the Colts or the Texans will be trailing. You can maybe try to predict that they'll have 5, 6 catches in those games. But they're spot plays. You pick your moments and you can maybe use them, or you can use them on bye weeks. But I typically like to go more for upside guys, but if you need to mix in a couple of safer picks, they'll give you some PPR value. Um, all right, all right. So I got to make sure I answer this one because I bugged my friend Gary, to get in here and ask me a question, and so this is what he asked me. It's kind of a weird question, random question. What are your thoughts on all the second-year quarterbacks, plus Baker Mayfield and Teddy Bridgewater, for redraft and for dynasty? So I got six names then. So that would be the second year quarterbacks of note would be Kyler Murray, Dwayne Haskins, Daniel Jones, Gardner Minshew, and then you'd also have Teddy Bridgewater and Baker Mayfield also thrown in there for whatever reason. So these 6 quarterbacks. So what do I think about them redraft and dynasty? I'll start with redraft. I did go ahead and order them for redraft, so I don't think there's any question. Kyler Murray would be the top option there. He's consistently going in those top 6 quarterbacks. And I think he belongs there. He's got the rushing upside. He's got the weapons. He's got the high speed offense. So, I love Kyler Murray this year, and I love him in Dynasty. He's super young. He's got a lot of weapons that are tied to him. He's got an offensive minded coach. So, Kyler Murray, great redraft, great Dynasty asset. And then for redraft, I'd go Baker Mayfield next. He's got an improved offensive line. He's got great weapons. Kareem Hunt, David Njoku, Austin Hooper, Nick Chubb, Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham. He's got everything around him to succeed. He was an incredible college quarterback. He has the record for passing touchdowns as a rookie. I think we've lost the script a little bit with Baker Mayfield and what we saw last year. I think second year slump, terrible coaching staff, terrible offensive line. I think a lot of things worked against him. He had a really tough passing schedule. So Baker's my second pick there. And then Daniel Jones is probably my next guy. He's got a little bit of that sneaky rushing upside. He's got pretty good weapons in New York with Ingram and Barkley, and then Shepard, Slayton, Tate. So, he's got good weapons. He's got a good coach. I don't like Jason Garrett as the offensive coordinator. I don't like Jason Garrett as an Eagles fan. I hate Jason Garrett. But you know, he has coached Dak to fantasy relevant seasons. He's coached um, Tony Romo to fantasy relevant seasons. So, there's no reason to think that Daniel Jones can't put it all together and have a breakout season. Um, and obviously, his defense is in shambles. He should be throwing plenty. So, Daniel Jones would be my third guy there. And then it would be Minshew and Bridgewater pretty closely together there. I like Minshew a little bit more because he's got that rushing upside as well. I think he did have about 300 rushing yards last season, and he didn't even play all 16. Um, he actually had a very interesting rookie season. He was very bad in a lot of ways, but in a lot of other ways, he was pretty comparable to Kyler Murray. So I'm very excited to see what he can do this season. I'm a big DJ Chark fan as well, so I'm hoping he can support DJ Chark's fantasy value for me because I'm going to have him everywhere. Um, but yeah, no, I like Gardner Minshew. I think he's a buy in dynasty leagues. I think just just purely for 2020 alone. I mean, I think he's a late 20 something quarterback in dynasty ADP right now, and he could easily finish as a high end QB2. He could definitely hold on to this job. If he all he has to do is help the Jaguars win enough games so that they can't draft Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields, and they're going to be stuck with him. So I think he's got a decent shot, at least a 50-50 shot of retaining the job after this season. So I like Minshew in Dynasty as well as redraft. And then Teddy Bridgewater, he's going to have to throw the ball a ton in Carolina because they have possibly the worst defense in the NFL, and they're in a division with Matt Ryan, Drew Brees, Tom Brady. He's got DJ Moore, he's got Christian McCaffrey, Curtis Samuel, Robbie Anderson, Ian Thomas. He's got great weapons that fit his skill set to sort of throw it short and have them gain yards after the catch. He's got an innovative college mind coming in, too, if Joe Brady as well. So I like Bridgewater to have some sneaky upside. I just don't think he can finish as a QB1, or at least not a high end QB1. I just think he's too conservative as a passer to do that. But definitely a steady guy that you can get pretty late in your draft. And then finally, Dwayne Haskins would be the last on this list. I think he's going as like the second to last or the last of the starting quarterbacks right now, and I think that's fair. We just haven't seen enough from him to know if he's got any juice whatsoever. And I mean, it's also just partly not his fault that the Redskins just don't have anything on offense. I mean, they've got McLaurin, and then I mean, they are so devoid of weaponry that there are whole portions of Twitter that are just standing the hell out of Steven Sims. And I just don't. I mean, nothing against Steven Sims. I'm sure he's a great guy and he might be a great wide receiver, but just the fact that there's actually a hype train for Steven Sims because he had 3 decent games at the end of 2019 just tells you everything you know about the weapons in Washington. All right. Guess I shouldn't have said, I should say the Washington football team. Um, I mean, I think Jeremy Sprinkle is their starting tight end right now. It's just not a good time for Dwayne Haskins. So, he doesn't really run the ball. He doesn't have weapons. The team should be terrible this year, most likely. I just don't see much upside there. But, in Dynasty, you can be optimistic if you want to go get him. He's not that expensive and he's young, so if you want to go get him and see what he can do long term, then by all means. But yeah, that'll be my thought on those 6 guys. Let's see here. All right. So a few more things that I wrote down. Somebody asked me to pick players with ADPs in the top 4 rounds and explain why I disagree with consensus. So pick a couple of overhyped players, undervalued players. I'm not sure if this was a dynasty or a redraft question. I did pick out a name. Whoa, what's going on? Did pick out a name real quick for dynasty that's being overhyped, and that would be Josh Allen. I think just going a lot of times as the QB7, QB8 in dynasty. That makes me a little bit nervous, mainly because he's not a good quarterback. And I know that there are people that don't like to hear that. There are people that are very big Josh Allen fans. It's awesome that he's been able to make the playoffs. The stuff he does with his legs is great, but the metrics are pretty undeniable that he's just not accurate. I just don't think that he's ever going to be a prolific passing quarterback. Um, and you look at last year, 9 rushing touchdowns. I don't think that's necessarily repeatable, or at least it's not likely to be repeated. Um, Stephon Diggs can help a little bit. But I just think when you're looking at a quarterback, when I'm looking at dynasty players in general, it always makes me nervous if I'm banking on a guy that I don't actually think is particularly talented, because there's just a lot more volatility there. You have to hope that it's an Andy Dalton situation where the team just gets forced into letting him start for 6, 7 years with it because they just have no way out. Because they can't get a high drafted quarterback or they can't get a free agent. And I just don't like being in that precarious situation. I'd much rather have a guy that I believe will genuinely be a quality starter for a long time. I'd rather have Carson Wentz in Dynasty personally than Josh Allen. And that's not, me being a Homer Eagles fan. I just think it's a lot more likely that in 2 years Carson Wentz will be a starter. So if I have to sacrifice, a little bit of that rushing upside and that top, that elite potential to have a stable asset like Wentz, I'd rather do that. So that's my overvalued or overhyped dynasty guy. And then in redraft, just two quick ones. I think that DeAndre Hopkins is being a little overdrafted. You look at Hopkins, he's being drafted as the wide receiver 3. And he's moving to a new team, new quarterback, new coaching staff. I just think that makes me a little bit nervous. I think he's an amazing player, but like I already said, there's a lot of data that suggests. Oh, now I'm looking at it. Maybe he's the wide receiver 4. I'm not totally sure. He's either 3 or 4. Um, Michael Thomas is definitely going ahead. Devontae Adams is going ahead, and then him and Tyreek Hill are very close together. But I just think there's a lot of risk there with him moving to a new scheme. You do see elite wide receivers have down years when they make transitions. Odell Beckham was hurt last year, but who's to say that some of his struggles weren't due to a new quarterback? And we don't know what the volume is going to look like there. They've got Christian Kirk in Arizona. They've got Larry Fitzgerald. Dan Arnold, the tight end. No, he's there, but probably not much of a threat. But you've got Andy Isabella coming into year 2, Kenyon Drake out of the backfield, Chase Edmonds. I just don't know if you can see DeAndre Hopkins getting those 155, 160 targets. I think 130, 135 is more likely. And I just don't know if the efficiency is going to be there without the chemistry. So that makes me a little bit nervous. I still think he's a great option. But I'd be taking Julio over him. I'd probably be taking Chris Godwin over him. Definitely Adams, Hill, Thomas. So when you get to that wide receiver 6, 7 range is where I feel a little more comfortable. But at his current price, I'm not going to have any of them. And I'm always taking running backs there too. So that would be one guy. And then I think Nick Chubb is being undervalued a little bit. In different places I'm looking at here, he's listed as the RB12. That can't possibly be right. Let me double check this. Okay, wait. Now it says RB8. That's not too bad. I thought, oh, this is standard scoring. Okay. Sorry. I'm just looking at Fantasy Pros right now. Okay, yes. So in PPR, Nick Chubb's going as the RB12. So I was correct about that. That seems a little low to me. According to Fantasy Pros, at least, I don't know where they get their data. It looks like it's from ESPN and Yahoo. He's going behind Aaron Jones, going behind Josh Jacobs, going behind Miles Sanders, Kenny and Drake. I definitely don't like seeing Chubb go after Aaron Jones or Kenyon Drake. And I don't really like it after Miles Sanders. I did take Sanders over Chubb the other day in the draft, because I already have a few shares of Chubb and I don't have any Sanders. And I just wanted to grab one just for the upside. But the thing about Nick Chubb is he's so safe. His volume is so safe. He's going to get the work on the ground. He's probably not going to get a ton through the air, but he has potential to gain, to get a little more than he did last year if he's continuing to work on his passing skills. There is a new coaching staff, so you never know how they're going to want to deploy him. I just think he's a lot safer, and I think people are really interested in Drake and Sanders, the shiny new toys, and then probably drafting Jones based on what he did last year. But Chubb's going to see more carries than Jones. He has less competition than Jones. He could very easily be on a better or equal offense to Aaron Jones. I just don't really see a reason why he would go behind Aaron Jones. I know Jones will probably catch a few more passes, but it's Chubb's just so safe. He's so safe. So I think he's being undervalued. And I'll just jump on this one real quick because I see it. It says, with minimal homerism bias, how much should we expect from Miles Sanders this year and going forward? The consensus RB1, absolutely. Absolutely the RB1. Definitely going to overtake Christian McCaffrey this year. No, I do think that some of the hype on Miles Sanders is going a little bit overboard. But I also think that Doug Peterson has sort of changed his tune a little bit. He's been talking about Sanders taking the load. Um, we're talking about him taking on more volume, and he does have a three down skill set. He really is a great running back, um, and he has a clear path to a lot of passing down work because the Eagles are so limited in the wide receiver department. So I think, you know, with the right volume, he could score a lot in this offense. I mean, it is a good offense. It's a pretty good offensive line. Losing Brandon Brooks hurts, but definitely has that RB1 as in top 12, not the RB1, but he has RB1 upside for sure. Uh, I definitely see him more in the RB 10, 11, 12 range than I do the top five. I just don't know if I can see Doug Peterson going that all in, but I think he can see the workload he needs to get into that top 12. Um, so that would be Miles Sanders. Now, the other thing that was asked was about, and I lost my post-it note, was about the Texans wide receivers. More or less, who do you like in that wide receiver group now that Hopkins is gone? What should we expect? And this is good because I think Brandon Cooks is absolutely being undervalued right now in drafts. He, yes, he had a bad season last year. He had a concussion. He had a hard time with his health and kind of being phased out of that offense because of it. But he's being drafted now as the wide receiver 35. And in the 5 seasons before last year, he had not finished lower than, I believe, wide receiver 15. I know he had one season as like wide receiver 8. He was 11, 13, 15. And this is on 3 different teams. This was on the Patriots, the Saints, the Rams. Wherever he went, he has had success. And now he's coming in. Hopkins is gone. Will Fuller is going to play 4 games before he hurts his hamstring. Let's be honest. Not a big Will Fuller fan. I know he's had some good games when he's been on the field, but just wildly inconsistent. Not the kind of player that Brandon Cooks is. Cooks is not a one-dimensional deep threat. He is able to get the ball at all areas of the field. He's got yards after the catch ability, and I think that he really could thrive. I don't see him as a top 15 finisher this year, but definitely think he can get to that wide receiver 2 range with Watson. He's already shown that he can change teams and adapt very quickly. Other guys I might be more hesitant, but to go to the Patriots in your first year and be top 15 and then to go to the Rams and do it again, he has shown an affinity for that. So I do have a tendency to want to trust him this season. The injury is really the only thing that would have me worried, but he gets to play with a good quarterback. I mean, Deshaun Watson's a better quarterback than Jared Goff. And he gets to play as at least the 1A to Will Fuller's 1B. And if Will Fuller gets hurt or when, the undisputed 1A. So I like Brandon Cooks a lot. But I also think that Randall Cobb is something of a value in Houston. I think people are forgetting that he signed there. He's going as the wide receiver 77 right now, behind Corey Davis, Tyrell Williams, T. Higgins. He's going behind Antonio Brown, who has retired, I think, 4 times from the NFL now. So Randall Cobb, who, by the way, had, I think, over 800 yards last year with the Cowboys as their 3rd wide receiver, is now going to an offense that really doesn't have a good slot wide receiver, has a lot of guys that can stretch the field. And I think he really could see some underneath work in a high-powered offense. So I don't see any reason why he can't be one of these flex plays. A guy who in a predicted shootout can have 6, 7, 8 receptions and maybe catch a touchdown. I think wide receiver 77 is just absolutely insane. Just as a guy that you can grab like in the last round of your draft, and use him as a bye week fill-in or whatever. I think he's a tremendous value. But, limited upside. And then playing off of that, there was also a question about how Brandon Cooks leaving the Rams will affect Cooper Cup. So I might as well just kind of slide right into that. I am off of Cooper Cup this year. He's a total fade for me. So I don't want him. I think that he could definitely finish where he's being drafted, which is somewhere around wide receiver 15, 14. I definitely think that that's within his range of outcomes. But there's two problems. The first one is there's just so many questions. His second half of the season, he just totally fell off the map. And it corresponded with Brandon Cooks' injury. So, Brandon Cooks leaves the field. Cooper Cup gets worse. And, we can dive deep into that. I think it really comes down mainly to the 12 personnel, two tight ends on the field that the Rams were running a lot of 12 personnel. And that's when Tyler Higbee kind of broke out. That's when Robert Woods broke out. But the thing is, when you run 12 personnel, you pretty much don't have a wide receiver in the slot, which is where Cooper Cup thrives. So you push Cooper Cup outside, he's not going to succeed outside. So if the Rams come in this season and they don't see Josh Reynolds, as a great third wide receiver, and they say, maybe we're going to run some more two tight end sets with Everett and Higbee, that's bad for Cup. That's going to put him outside. He's not going to succeed against man coverage. And he's going to disappoint you like he did last year when his snap count it continually was declining. He was totally bailed out by touchdowns. So we could easily see that this year. And then, he falls outside the top receivers. Whereas Robert Woods, who's going behind Cooper Cup, he just has far fewer questions. We know he can play outside. We know he's going to be an every down player. He's done it for 2 consecutive years as a wide receiver one or borderline wide receiver one. So there's just no situation where I'm going Cooper Cup over Robert Woods, just because his upside is similar and he's so much safer. So I'm out on Cup. I'm not big on him in Dynasty either. He's almost 27. I think he's going to be 27 this season or by the end of this season. He's going to be up for a contract after this year. He is 27 years old. Yep. He's going to be up for a contract after this year. And with these guys, that thrive in the slot, they're so scheme dependent. They have to go to a team that runs 3 wide sets. They have to have an innovative coach that can get them open in space. I'd much rather go for a guy that I think is just a supremely talented outside wide receiver. A guy like Calvin Ridley, Cortland Sutton, AJ Brown, than a Cooper Cup who's going to be very reliant on the team that he's playing for and the coach that he has. So Cooper Cup, fade all around. He helped me win a championship last year. So no hard feelings for Cooper Cup, but just not excited moving forward. All right. I'm going to have time for a few more of these. So let's see. More thoughts on Deontay Johnson. Okay. Well, I'm sort of teetering on the edge of the Deontay hype train. I'm on board with him at his current ADP because he's been falling back down a little bit. So when I can get him around wide receiver 38, that seems fair. Although I'd much rather have some of the guys going behind him. Jamison Crowder specifically. I like Jamison Crowder this year. He's a really good target for me in that 9-10-ish range. Just going to see a ton of volume in the Jets offense. Not a lot of upside, but certainly a safe floor. 110, 120 targets easily within the range of outcomes. And I think Sam Darnold might surprise some people this year, might improve a little bit. But anyway, we're talking about Deontay Johnson. So he doesn't have an exciting profile as a college player, which is a red flag. He did do a lot on special teams, which is good. A very dynamic player. But he led all rookies in receptions, and that's something. And he did that without Ben Roethlisberger for most of the season. So what I think you're going to see if Ben Roethlisberger can stay healthy is you're going to see the Steelers return to a much more pass-heavy offense. You're going to see more volume. You're going to see more scoring. And so what I think that might be able to do is just give Deontay some more opportunity if he can fully supplant James Washington as that second wide receiver. Now, the fear for me is that they kind of split as that second kind of 2A, 2B, where they're both sort of splitting behind Juju. And then neither of them is very reliable. One of them has a good game, and then the next one has a good game. But the theory is that if Deontay can really push himself into that that role as that second wide receiver, then I really do think there is upside because we've seen Ben support Antonio Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster. So yeah, I don't mind him at his ADP. I like him a lot. I definitely think some people are going crazy about him in Dynasty. Um, all right, so I'm gonna wrap this up real quick. Is DJ Chark going to be a legit wide receiver too, or is he bad at football? I just need to say real quick. That's a horrible thing to say. He is not bad at football. I love DJ Chark. He's amazing. Go get him in Dynasty. Go get him in redraft. He's a value in all formats, and that's gonna finish it up. So, uh, wow, that really flew by. It's been a lot of fun answering all these questions, guys. Thank you so much for sending them in. Thank you, Space Ghost Force, for inviting me to come in here on this Discord chat. And I will catch you guys on Twitter. You can follow me at Fantasy Freezer. Check out my content at dynastyfootballfactory.com. Um, and once again, just thanks guys so much for listening.